He tried once and failed. He tried the second time and failed again. He tried the third time and failed again. By now, most people would have walked away. Investors were nervous. Critics were laughing. And the idea that a private company could build rockets capable of changing the future seemed almost delusional. But for Elon Musk, quitting was never really an option. So he did something few people would ever dare to do. He poured what remained of his money, his reputation, and almost every ounce of belief he had left into one final attempt. One last rocket, one last chance, one launch that would decide whether the dream survived or died forever. And if this failed, everything could be over.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It's going, baby. It's going. Come on, baby. Let's go. All right, so what you got?
Speed 1.2 kilometers per second, downrange distance 11 kilometers.
Shortly after main engine cutoff, we're going to separate the stages and begin the second stage ignition.
Come on.
How Elon Musk built a billion-dollar empire. The real story. Imagine this for a second. It's 2008, California. Late at night, in a quiet office, a man sits alone in the dark, staring at a screen he can barely afford to look at anymore. Outside, the world has no idea what is happening. But inside that room, everything is collapsing. His rocket company has failed 3 times. One more failure could end it forever. His electric car company is burning money so fast it may not survive the month. His marriage is falling apart. His savings are almost gone. And after years of chasing impossible ideas, even the people closest to him are starting to doubt whether any of this will work. What makes this moment extraordinary is who that man becomes. Because the man sitting alone in that darkness will one day become one of the wealthiest and most influential people the modern world has ever seen. His name is Elon Musk. But this story is not just about money, rockets, or fame. It is a story about obsession, failure, sacrifice, loneliness, reinvention, and what happens when someone refuses to stop, even when everything says they should. And before we go deeper, I just want to say this. If you're new here, welcome. I'm building something real with this channel, a place where we tell powerful stories about ambition, success, mistakes, pressure, and the truth behind the people the world thinks it knows. I'm still growing, still learning, and I genuinely want this community to feel like we're discovering these stories together. So tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and who should we explore next? And if stories like this inspire you, challenge you, or simply make you think a little deeper, consider subscribing. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Before the billions, before the rockets, before the headlines, before the world knew the name, Elon Musk. To understand Elon Musk, you cannot start with the rockets. You cannot start with the billions. You cannot even start with Silicon Valley. You have to go back much further to a city called Pretoria in South Africa in 1971. That is where this story truly begins. Pretoria in the early 1970s was a city of sharp contrasts. It was warm, leafy, and prosperous on its surface. But underneath it was a country shaped by apartheid, a brutal system of racial segregation that controlled nearly every aspect of life. Into this world on the 28th of June, 1971, a boy was born to Errol Musk, an electromechanical engineer, and May Musk, a model and dietitian who was one of the most recognizable faces in South African media. They named their son Elon Reeve Musk, and from the very first years of his life, it was clear that something about this child was different. Elon Musk was the kind of child who made adults slightly uncomfortable, not because he misbehaved, but because he thought in a way that most adults around him could not quite follow. While other children in Pretoria were running around outside, kicking balls and chasing each other through the streets, Elon was inside, reading, not storybooks, not comic books, encyclopedias. He read both volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica from cover to cover before he had even reached his teenage years. When he finished them, he asked his teachers what else he could read to learn more about the world. His teachers did not have an answer for him. He had already read more than they had assigned. He was not trying to show off. He genuinely wanted to know everything. About science, about space, about how the universe worked and why it worked that way. But here is what the highlight reels and the Forbes profiles always leave out. The boy who was reading encyclopedias and dreaming of the stars was also a boy living in a household that was quietly breaking apart. When Elon was 8 years old, his parents divorced. It was a painful rupture in the family, and his mother May moved the 3 children, Elon, his brother Kimball, and his sister Tosca, to the Musk family holiday home on the east coast of South Africa. After a few years in a decision he would later reflect on with complicated emotions, Elon chose to go and live with his father, Errol. It was a choice made out of sympathy, out of a young boy's sense that perhaps his father needed him. But what Elon found inside that house was not warmth. It was something that left a mark on him that never fully healed. Elon Musk has said very little publicly about his father over the years, but what he has said is devastating in its plainness. He has described Elon Musk as a difficult person to be around, someone who inflicted a level of psychological torture on him that made his life deeply miserable. He has called his father, in one interview, a, quote, terrible human being, and said there is almost no good memory he can retrieve from his time living in that house. His mother, May, in her own autobiography, described the abuse in the household in terms that were blunt and chilling. The children were not shielded from it. The environment Elon grew up in, on the inside of that home, was one of emotional cruelty, unpredictability, and fear. And yet, instead of shutting down, Elon went deeper inward, into his books, into science fiction, into the worlds inside his own mind. If home was difficult, school was, in some ways, even worse. Elon Musk has said publicly, with real pain in his voice, that his school years felt like hell. He was small, quiet, and intellectually unusual in ways that made him a target. He was the shortest, skinniest, and smartest kid in the class, and in the schools he attended in South Africa, that combination made him prey. He has described gangs of boys who would, in his own words, literally hunt him down. Not bother him in hallways, not tease him at lunch, hunt him. And the bullying was not the kind that leaves bruises that fade in a few days. In one incident that has been documented by his biographers, a group of boys threw Elon down a concrete flight of stairs and then proceeded to beat him until he was unconscious. So viciously, so relentlessly, that when his father arrived at the hospital to see him, he did not even recognize his own son's face. It was that swollen, that bloodied. Elon spent time in the hospital recovering from that attack. What is remarkable, and what becomes a central thread in everything that follows, is what Elon Musk did with all of that pain. He did not become withdrawn and timid. He did not surrender to it. He channeled it into an almost terrifying level of focus. He trained in judo, karate, and taekwondo, briefly to be able to protect himself and his younger brother Kimball from further attacks. But far more importantly, he began building entire worlds inside his mind. Worlds that were better, more logical, more fair than the one he was living in. Science fiction became his sanctuary. Philosophy, physics. He read everything he could find. And then, at just 12 years old, he did something that would become the first visible signal of everything that was coming. He wrote and coded his very first video game, a space-themed game, entirely from scratch. He called it Blastar, and he sold it for $500. He was 12 years old, $500, his first transaction, his first proof that an idea inside his head could become something real in the world. At 17, Elon Musk made a decision that took tremendous courage for a teenager in 1989 South Africa. He got out. He had long been determined to make his way to the United States. The country he believed, having read about it voraciously, was the place where the future was actually being built. His father dismissed this dream. Elon Musk reportedly told his son that America would chew him up and throw him back out. But Elon left anyway. He used his Canadian citizenship through his mother's side of the family to move first to Canada, where he attended Queen's University in Ontario. He worked whatever jobs he could find, cleaning out boilers, shoveling grain, doing hard physical labor that paid almost nothing. He sent letters to companies in the cities where he wanted to work, not asking for jobs, but asking simply to be allowed to visit so he could learn. He was relentless. He was obsessed. He was preparing methodically and without rest for something he could not yet fully name. From Queen's University in Canada, Elon transferred to the University of Pennsylvania in the United States, one of the most prestigious universities in the country, part of the Ivy League. There he pursued not one, but 2 degrees simultaneously, one in economics from the Wharton School and one in physics. He graduated with both. Then he was accepted into a PhD program in energy physics at Stanford University in California, one of the most competitive programs in the world. He arrived in California to begin his doctorate in 1995. And then, 2 days into the program, he walked out. He withdrew from Stanford University after 2 days. Not because it was too hard, not because he had changed his mind about learning, but because he had looked out the window at Silicon Valley and seen something that could not wait. The internet had arrived, and Elon Musk could feel in his bones that history was being made in real time right outside the door, and he was not going to sit inside a classroom while it happened. So in 1995, Elon Musk and his brother Kimball took all the money they had, which was not much, and rented a tiny office in Palo Alto, California. They could not afford an apartment on top of the office rent, so they slept on the office floor. They showered at the YMCA down the street. They ate cheap food and worked until their eyes gave out, and then got up and did it again. They were building a company called Zip2, a web-based business directory that helped newspapers provide their readers with maps and local information online. It sounds simple now. In 1995, when most people did not even have an email address, it was genuinely ahead of its time. Elon coded almost everything himself, working hours that most human beings would find physiologically impossible. 20-hour days, 7 days a week, week after week. He was not building a company. He was building a machine. And he was learning, at enormous personal cost, everything about how that machine worked. 4 years later, in 1999, Compaq Computer Corporation acquired Zip2 for $307 million. It was one of the largest acquisitions in the early internet era. Elon Musk's personal share of that sale was $22 million. He was 27 years old. $22 million. Most human beings confronted with that number at 27 would take a breath, would travel, would buy a home, a car, maybe a boat, would rest even briefly. Elon Musk did none of those things. He took his $22 million and, within weeks, poured almost all of it back into a new company, an online financial services company he called X.com. He kept almost nothing for himself. He believed so completely in what he was doing that personal comfort simply did not factor into the calculation. And that tells you something profound about the kind of man he was becoming. X.com was a bold, ambitious idea, an internet-based bank and financial platform at a time when most people still did not trust putting their credit card information online. Elon poured himself into it with the same ferocious intensity that had built Zip2. But this time, the politics inside the company were brutal. His own board of directors staged a coup against him while he was on his honeymoon in 2000, removing him as CEO of his own company. It was a betrayal that cut deep, but it also could not undo what X.com had already set in motion. The company had merged with a competitor called Confinity, which had built a small payments product called PayPal. That product was gaining traction faster than anyone had anticipated. And in 2002, when eBay acquired the combined company for $1.5 billion, Elon Musk's share of the sale came to $180 million. He was 30 years old, and now he had enough money to do something truly insane. Here is the moment where the story of Elon Musk becomes something genuinely difficult to explain with conventional logic. He had $180 million. He was 30 years old. He had already succeeded twice, spectacularly, in the most competitive business environment on the planet. Any rational financial advisor in the world in 2002 would have told him the same thing. Diversify, invest carefully, let the money grow. Perhaps start another technology company with a modest slice of the capital. But Elon Musk did not hire a financial advisor. Instead, he sat down and asked himself a single question that would alter the course of human history. What are the most important problems facing the long-term survival of humanity? He came up with three answers: sustainable energy, the internet, and access to information, and making humanity a multiplanetary species. And then he decided to personally try to solve all three. In 2001, before the PayPal sale had even closed, Elon had begun researching the possibility of sending a rocket to Mars. He was not interested in fame. He was not interested in vanity projects. He was genuinely, deeply, almost frighteningly serious about the idea that humanity needed to become a species that could exist on more than one planet. Because if we stayed only on Earth, a single catastrophic event could end us entirely. He flew to Russia to try to buy decommissioned intercontinental ballistic missiles that could be converted into rockets. He met with Russian aerospace officials who, by multiple accounts, were openly dismissive of this young American who had arrived with a laptop and a dream and no engineering credentials they recognized. They refused to sell him anything. On the flight home, Elon Musk opened a spreadsheet on his laptop and began calculating the cost of building a rocket from scratch. His traveling companion watched him work in silence. Then Musk looked up and said, "I think we can build this rocket ourselves." In June 2002, Elon Musk founded Space Exploration Technologies Corporation, SpaceX. He put $100 million of his own money into it, more than half of everything he had made from PayPal. The aerospace industry responded with a reaction that ranged from amusement to contempt. The idea of a private company building rockets was not just unusual, it was considered by many veterans of the industry to be essentially delusional. Rocket science was the domain of governments, of NASA, of Roscosmos, of agencies with billions in annual budgets and thousands of engineers with decades of experience. Who was this internet entrepreneur with a laptop and $100 million? One senior aerospace executive reportedly told colleagues after hearing about SpaceX that Elon Musk was going to lose every dollar he had. It was not said with malice. It was said as a simple statement of what seemed to everyone watching like an obvious fact. At almost exactly the same time, in 2004, Elon Musk became the lead investor and chairman of the board of a struggling electric vehicle startup called Tesla Motors. Tesla had been founded the year before by Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning, two engineers who believed the world was ready for a serious electric car. Not a golf cart, not a toy, but a real high-performance automobile that happened to run on electricity. Elon invested $6.5 million into Tesla and took the chairman's role. He had not founded Tesla, he had not come up with the concept, but he had seen the vision immediately, and he had recognized that this company and SpaceX were connected, that sustainable energy on Earth and sustainable civilization beyond Earth were two sides of the same problem. So now Elon Musk was simultaneously trying to build a rocket company and an electric car company with the same pool of money at the same time. The people around him began to worry. By 2006, SpaceX had assembled its first rocket, the Falcon 1, and was preparing for its first launch from Amalek Island, a tiny coral atoll in the Pacific Ocean, part of the Marshall Islands. The Falcon 1 was not a massive rocket by the standards of NASA. It was relatively small, but it represented something that had never happened before in the history of space exploration. A privately built, privately funded rocket attempting to reach orbit. The engineers at SpaceX were young, scrappy, and ferociously motivated. They had been recruited largely by the force of Elon Musk's vision and his willingness to work harder than anyone else in the room. He was not a figurehead CEO who arrived for photo opportunities. He was in the factory, in the design meetings, reading engineering manuals at night so he could challenge his own engineers in technical detail the following morning. He had essentially taught himself rocket science by obsessive self-study. On March 24, 2006, the Falcon 1 lifted off the launch pad for the first time. For 33 seconds, it climbed into the sky over the Pacific. And then a fuel leak ignited an engine fire, and the rocket fell back to Earth. 3 years of work, tens of millions of dollars. Gone in 33 seconds. The SpaceX team was devastated. Elon Musk stood in front of his engineers after the failure and told them that SpaceX was not going to die, that they were going to learn from what had happened, fix what had gone wrong, and try again. The words were strong, but privately the weight of what had just happened was immense, and things at Tesla were not going any better. The company was burning through money at a pace that was alarming even to Elon, who had committed to funding it personally. The production of Tesla's first car, the Roadster, was running catastrophically behind schedule, and costs were escalating far beyond original projections. The second launch of the Falcon 1 came on March 21, 2007. The rocket performed better this time. It actually made it into space, but a fuel slosh problem caused it to spin out of control before it could achieve orbit. Another failure. Another mountain of data to analyze. Another mountain of repairs to make. Another massive drain on the financial resources of a company that was already stretched dangerously thin. And at Tesla, the situation was darkening further. The Roadster was not in production. Costs that had been projected at $65,000 per car were ballooning toward $100,000. Elon Musk made the painful decision to remove Martin Eberhard, the co-founder of Tesla, from his position as CEO, a move that generated enormous controversy and left a bitter legacy that would follow the company for years. Every decision Elon made was being watched, questioned, and second-guessed by an industry that was rooting for him to fail. August 2, 2008, third launch of the Falcon 1. By this point, Elon Musk had invested virtually his entire fortune between SpaceX and Tesla. There was almost nothing left, and the world was watching, because enough people in aerospace and finance had taken notice that a failure here would likely be the end of SpaceX entirely. The rocket lifted off cleanly. It climbed into the sky. It reached space. And then, during the separation sequence between the first and second stages, something went catastrophically wrong. The first stage, decelerating after separation, did not move away from the second stage fast enough. The two stages collided. The rocket was destroyed. 3 years of Falcon 1 launches, 3 failures. And now SpaceX had money for exactly one more attempt. 1. If the fourth rocket failed, SpaceX was finished. Elon Musk himself said it plainly years later. A fourth failure would have been absolutely game over. Done. And then came September of 2008, the month that changed everything and very nearly changed nothing at all. Because while SpaceX was counting down to its fourth and final launch attempt, Elon Musk's personal life had also come apart entirely. In August, his wife Justine had publicly announced their divorce after 8 years of marriage. They had 5 sons together. Their first child, a boy named Nevada, had died of sudden infant death syndrome at just 10 weeks old. A loss so devastating that Elon has rarely been able to speak about it publicly without his composure breaking. Now the marriage itself was over. And on top of that grief and that failure, the global financial crisis of 2008 was exploding across Wall Street, making it nearly impossible for Tesla to raise the emergency funding it desperately needed. By late October 2008, Tesla had just $9 million left in its accounts. $9 million for a company that needed hundreds of millions to survive. Elon Musk described this period years later in terms that are almost impossible to fully comprehend, given what he would eventually become. He said, and these are his words, that 2008 was the worst year of his life. He was borrowing money from friends to pay his personal rent. He was personally funding both companies out of whatever he could scrape together, knowing that if either of them died, it would not just be a financial loss, it would mean that the ideas he had committed his entire adult life to would die with him. He later said he never thought he would have a nervous breakdown, but that he came, in his own estimation, pretty close. He could either split what remained of his money between SpaceX and Tesla, giving both a chance, or focus everything on one and watch the other die. He chose to split it. He acknowledged with characteristic honesty that this could have been a terrible decision that killed both companies at once. On the evening of September 28, 2008, at precisely 11:22 p.m. Pacific Time, the Falcon 1 rocket, SpaceX's fourth attempt, the last one they could afford, lifted off from Kwajalein Atoll in the Pacific Ocean. The engineers watching that launch had lived through 3 failures. They had rebuilt, recalculated, and reimagined. They had poured 3 years of their lives into this moment. Elon Musk was watching. The rocket cleared the launch pad. It climbed through the atmosphere. It survived stage separation. Cleanly, perfectly, exactly as designed. And it kept going, and going, until the Falcon 1 became the first privately developed liquid-fueled rocket in the history of human civilization to reach Earth orbit. When the confirmation came through, grown engineers who had barely slept in weeks broke down and wept openly. Some laughed. Some could not do either. They just stood still, trying to absorb what had just happened. But the celebration was brief, because SpaceX still had no paying customers. The successful launch was historic, but it did not immediately mean survival. Elon Musk recalled waking up on the Sunday before Christmas in 2008 and thinking, in his own words, "Damn, this is the closest I have ever gotten." He was still staring down 2 catastrophes at once. Tesla's emergency financing round had not yet closed. The company needed that money before Christmas, or it would miss payroll and likely collapse. And SpaceX, even with a successful launch behind it, was still operating on fumes. Then on December 23, 2008, NASA called. NASA awarded SpaceX a $1.6 billion contract to resupply the International Space Station across a series of planned missions. When the call came through, Elon Musk, a man known for controlled, analytical composure, said 3 words: "I love you guys." Just 2 days later, on Christmas Eve 2008, Tesla's emergency $40 million funding round closed, hours before the company would have missed payroll and been forced to shut down. 2 companies, 2 life ropes, thrown at the very last possible moment. Elon Musk had, by every reasonable measure, survived the unsurvivable. And the world, for the most part, had no idea how close it had all come to ending. Because here is what happens when you survive the unsurvivable. When you bet everything and somehow do not lose. You do not go back to playing it safe. You do not pull back from the edge and live more carefully. If you are Elon Musk, what you do is you take the lesson that the impossible is possible, that the system can be beaten, that conventional wisdom is often just fear dressed up as expertise, and you apply it harder, wider, faster. You begin to build not just companies, but an entire ecosystem. Not products, but infrastructure. Not a career, but a civilization project. And that is exactly what the years following 2008 would reveal about the true scale of what Elon Musk was attempting to build. Tesla survived Christmas 2008. And from that moment forward, it did not just survive, it transformed an entire global industry. The Tesla Roadster went into production and proved something the automotive world had loudly insisted was impossible. That an electric car could be genuinely desirable, not compromised, not sluggish, not a vehicle you drove out of guilt. The Roadster was fast, genuinely, startlingly fast, and it was beautiful, and it carried a kind of cultural energy that no electric vehicle had ever carried before. The auto industry watched with a mixture of curiosity and anxiety. Then came the Model S in 2012, a full-sized luxury sedan that won Motor Trend's Car of the Year, a publication that had never given that award to an electric vehicle in its entire history. The Model S did not just win, it dominated. It scored the highest rating the publication had ever given to any car in its testing program. At the same time, SpaceX was building on the foundation of Falcon 1's success with an ambition that was scaling at a pace that kept even the most optimistic observers slightly off balance. The company developed the Falcon 9, a larger, more powerful rocket designed to carry significant payloads into orbit. And then Elon Musk did something that the aerospace industry had never seen before in the commercial sector. He began landing the rockets after they had delivered their payloads. Not crashing them into the ocean, not discarding them. Landing them, vertically, on drone ships in the middle of the ocean or back at the launch site. The first successful landing of a Falcon 9 first stage happened in December 2015, and when it touched down, gently, precisely, exactly as designed, the engineers watching screamed with a noise that sounded less like professionals and more like human beings witnessing magic. Because from the outside, that is what it looked like. The logic behind reusable rockets was exactly the same logic Elon had been applying since he coded Blastar at 12 years old. The logic that the most efficient solution is almost always the one that conventional wisdom has decided is too complicated to try. An airplane does not get thrown away after every flight. A car does not get discarded after every trip. So why was a rocket, the most expensive vehicle ever built by human beings, thrown into the ocean after a single use? Every expendable rocket launch represented hundreds of millions of dollars simply disappearing into the sea. Elon Musk decided that was insane, and then he went and built the alternative. SpaceX's reusable rocket program reduced the cost of reaching orbit so dramatically that it fundamentally restructured the economics of the entire global space industry. Companies and governments that had been paying enormous amounts for launches suddenly had access to a fraction of that cost. The whole calculation of what was possible in space changed. By 2015, Elon Musk's net worth had climbed into the billions. Tesla's stock was rising. SpaceX was signing contracts with NASA, with commercial satellite operators, with national governments. Starlink, SpaceX's satellite internet project, which aimed to deploy thousands of small satellites in low Earth orbit to provide high-speed internet access to the entire planet, had been announced and was beginning its rollout. The scope of what Elon was building was becoming clear to anyone paying close attention. And what they were seeing was not a collection of independent companies. It was a system, a deliberate, deeply interconnected system in which every piece reinforced every other piece. Tesla's battery technology fed into energy storage products for homes and businesses. Solar City, which Elon had co-founded with his cousins, and which Tesla eventually absorbed, generated the solar energy that filled those batteries. SpaceX built the rockets. Starlink used those rockets to put satellites in orbit. Starlink provided internet. The internet powered everything else. It was a loop, a closed loop of infrastructure. And through all of this, Elon Musk was not slowing down. He was not delegating and retreating to a boardroom. By every account from employees, from biographers, from journalists who spent years reporting on him, he was working with a level of personal intensity that bordered on something beyond what most human beings can sustain. Stories from inside Tesla's gigafactories describe Elon sleeping in conference rooms during critical production ramp-ups, waking up in the same clothes he had gone to sleep in, and walking directly back onto the factory floor. Stories from SpaceX describe him reviewing engineering specifications at a level of technical detail that was not expected of a CEO, calling engineers at midnight to question design choices, pushing timelines that seemed physically impossible, and creating a culture of urgency so intense that it divided people sharply into those who thrived under it and those who could not survive it. In 2022, Elon Musk turned his attention to something that surprised even the most attentive observers of his career. He began acquiring shares in Twitter, the social media platform, and eventually made an offer to buy the entire company for $44 billion. The process was chaotic in a way that played out publicly and almost in real time. Elon offered to buy, then tried to withdraw, citing concerns about the number of fake and bot accounts on the platform. Twitter's board sued to force the deal through. A court agreed with Twitter. And in October 2022, Elon Musk walked into Twitter's San Francisco headquarters carrying a white porcelain sink, a visual joke about letting it sink in that he posted to his own account, and completed the acquisition. Within 48 hours, he had laid off roughly half the company's workforce. Within weeks, he had laid off much of what remained. Advertisers pulled their spending. The global media was in full alarm. The platform seemed to be disintegrating in real time. But here is what is important to understand about the Twitter acquisition, and about Elon Musk more broadly, when you strip away the noise of moment-to-moment headlines. Elon Musk renamed Twitter. He called it X, and X, in his stated vision, was not meant to be a social media platform. It was meant to be an everything app, a financial platform, a messaging network, a content engine, an artificial intelligence data source, and eventually a payment system all in one. The model he had in mind, according to people close to him, was inspired by WeChat in China, an app through which Chinese users pay bills, book taxis, order food, send money to friends, and conduct virtually all of their daily digital life. He had tried to build something like this in 1999 with X.com before his board forced him out. Now, 23 years later, he owned the platform outright, and he intended to finish what he had started. By 2024, Elon Musk's net worth had climbed back above $300 billion after the dramatic losses of 2022, when his wealth had fallen by nearly $200 billion in a single year. The largest single-year loss of personal wealth in recorded human history, largely tied to the decline in Tesla's stock price during the Twitter chaos. Starlink had surpassed 3 million paying subscribers globally. SpaceX's Starship, the largest and most powerful rocket ever built, had successfully completed flight tests that brought it closer to the goal of full reusability and eventual Mars missions than any vehicle in history. Neuralink, Elon's brain-computer interface company, had received FDA approval for human clinical trials and had successfully implanted its first chip into a human being. The patient, who had been paralyzed, was able to control a computer cursor with his thoughts. Tesla remained the most valuable automaker in the world by market capitalization. What does all of this actually mean? What does the full arc of Elon Musk's story, from the bullied boy in Pretoria, reading encyclopedias on a bedroom floor, to the man who owns the rocket company, the car company, the social network, the satellite internet constellation, the brain chip company, and the tunneling company? What does that arc actually tell us? It tells us several things simultaneously, and they do not all sit comfortably next to each other. It tells us that the human capacity for obsession, when pointed in the right direction, can produce outcomes that rewrite the boundaries of what civilization considers possible. It tells us that surviving pain, real, deep, formative pain, can, in the right person, become the fuel for something extraordinary rather than something broken. It tells us that conventional wisdom, in the hands of the truly unconventional, is just a ceiling waiting to be removed. But it also tells us something more complicated, something that requires honesty to say. The cost of what Elon Musk has built has been immense, not just to him personally, but to the people around him. There are former employees at Tesla who describe a culture of relentless pressure, of fear, of being asked to do things that no human being can sustainably maintain. There are people who gave years of their lives to his companies and left without the recognition or the compensation they felt they had earned. There are relationships, personal, familial, romantic, that did not survive the weight of what he demands from himself and from everyone in his orbit. Genius and ruthlessness are not opposites. They can coexist in the same person, and a complete telling of Elon Musk's story requires that you hold both truths at once, the extraordinary and the costly, without letting one erase the other. What Elon Musk is attempting, what he has been attempting, with a consistency that goes back decades, is nothing less than the reorganization of human civilization. He wants sustainable energy to replace fossil fuels. He wants electric vehicles to replace combustion engines. He wants satellite internet to connect every human being on Earth who currently has no access. He wants brain-computer interfaces to expand the capacity of human cognition. He wants a city on Mars, a real one, with people living and working there, within this century. These are not investor pitches. They are not marketing slogans. They are the stated goals of a man who, at 30 years old, took everything he had and betted on the idea that one human being, working with sufficient intensity and sufficient intelligence, could actually change the direction of history. And then he spent the next 25 years proving, imperfectly, controversially, painfully, and undeniably, that he was right. And so, after everything, the boy from Pretoria, the boy who was once beaten unconscious on a staircase, the young man who slept on an office floor in Palo Alto because survival mattered more than comfort, the man who borrowed money from friends just to pay rent in the darkest season of his life, the man who sat alone on the Sunday before Christmas in 2008, wondering if everything he had built was about to collapse forever. That same person would go on to reshape industries most people believed could never change. Not just cars, not just rockets, but the way humanity thinks about energy, transportation, space, artificial intelligence, and even the future itself. Love him or criticize him. Admire him or question him. One thing is difficult to deny. The world before Elon Musk is not the same world after him, and maybe that is what makes this story so difficult to ignore. Because this was never really a story about money. It was never only about billions, fame, or becoming the richest man in the world. It is a story about obsession, about sacrifice, about pain, about impossible ambition, about what happens when a human being decides completely, irreversibly, and at enormous personal cost that the world as it exists is simply not good enough, and then spends decades refusing to accept anything less than the world they imagine instead. Whether you find that inspiring, unsettling, admirable, dangerous, or somehow all of those things at once, probably says something honest about how you see human ambition itself. But the story still demands to be reckoned with. Because the truth is this, the real story of Elon Musk is still being written. And for better or worse, it is far from over. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you see things differently, tell me your biggest takeaway in the comments. I read them all. And if there's another extraordinary story you think deserves this level of depth, let me know below. I'll see you in the next one.